now. It's a great pleasure to welcome you all this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. It's more of a pleasure to introduce Richard Wood, who is joining us as the Regional Director of Bespoke Hotels. Now, Bespoke is a brand that we know personally at EP and love and have great relationships with Robin. And it's also a brand that has quite a diverse portfolio in Scotland and in the rest of the UK. What's interesting for us is really, I think, looking at those differences, and thank you, Richard, for being with us today. I know we've got a lot of hoteliers on, and everyone is keen to knowledge share and work out how we can work through all of this together, and how we can share that knowledge to the best of our abilities. So thanks, Richard, for joining us. Oh, I think, are you muted?
Sorry, no.
Okay, sorry. I thought I muted.
Thank you for having me.
No, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. So we do have a lot of our regular sort of Scotland audience on, and very keen to see what you have to say. So how are you finding things at the moment? What is the situation in Scotland?
I think generally it's I would say it's mixed, but we've found that anywhere really outside of, we have one property in Edinburgh. We have properties that we manage across the country, from Edinburgh to the east coast to the west coast, and as far north as Dornoch and Ullapool, and down in the Argyll Peninsula. So we cover the whole areas, and pretty much everywhere outside of Edinburgh, we don't have anywhere in Glasgow, is absolute boomtown at the moment. Which is great. I mean, we're struggling to cope with the volumes, obviously, prior to this, and I'm sure they're cursing me in the hotels because I said, you're not opening an 80-bed hotel. You need to plan your structure around 50 beds, 40, 50. If we could get to 50% occupancy, then, we'll be doing well. And they're chock-a-block. I mean, I think with the exception of Edinburgh, we have a place in the centre at Newton Moor, which is probably running about 50-60% occupancy. But certainly the West Coast, Stonefield Castle, Skye, Gairloch, Ullapool are, hugely busy and continue to pick up week on week at the same rate as they were doing the last 2 or 3, 4 weeks, which is when we really started to see stuff come through. So we're struggling to cope, if I'm honest. I've got managers that are screaming for housekeeping staff, food and beverage staff, and receptionists.
Well, that's massively positive to hear.
Yeah.
And I assume that there's a difference, sort of like you say, in the city centres versus the rural hotels.
Yeah, we don't really have the city. As I say, the only city centre location would be Edinburgh, where we manage the Bonham, and they are currently for August sitting with about 22% occupancy on the books. Projections would suggest the rate of pickup they may get to 40%. But I think the average rate there, obviously it's Edinburgh, and this time last year they were probably knocking rooms out at 350 quid. So the average rate is less than 50% of that.
That is fair. I think that's what a lot of researchers sort of told us, is that people are expecting it to wait till about 2022 before we get back to 2019 rate levels. Do you think that's fair? I mean, given what we've seen, the bounce back in the rest of the country, I suppose the big question is, no one knows, do they? I mean, if this thing goes away or is calming down by March, April, May next year, then I would imagine then that Edinburgh will bounce back relatively strongly, relatively quickly. But it assumes that there is a programme of festival events. It assumes there is a tattoo and all the other stuff that drives the volume, Christmas markets, all that sort of thing. I think if those things are running, then I think demand will return fairly quickly, because there's always been an oversupply. There's an oversupply of demand, isn't there? There's always been the excess. Yeah.
So hopefully you'd like to think there's enough there to take up the slack of any availability. but it's so reliant on the US and the international markets. It's probably not really up to us how well we might manage coronavirus. It's really up to how well they manage it, you know, in the States, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is a bit of a worry in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's completely out of control. Yeah, yeah.
And I mean, Scotland's not the only place that you have hotels. How are you seeing? Is there a difference elsewhere?
From what I'm hearing from my colleagues down south, yeah, it's definitely most of them rely more heavily on corporate business rather than leisure. I know Gotham is in Manchester is as busy as ever, but it's more unique, I think, and people are looking for that experience. And probably again, it's always had that over demand, so there's been enough there to take up any slack in availability. But Brooklyn, which we just opened in Manchester in February, that's I mean that's on its backside, to say, really struggling. And I think further south, it's just as difficult. They're running 20-30% occupancies at the moment.
Gosh, okay, yeah. It's interesting to hear though that Manchester is doing so well, but you're right, people are looking for that experience. The staycation is the new, well, I think it's the new word for 2020. So people are looking at somewhere that gives them that experience.
Yes, yeah, and maybe that's what we offer at some of these locations in Scotland. It comes along with the location and the experience. I think the problem we find up here is that everything's closed. I was talking to a couple earlier who, they were wanting to go to a distillery. They're all shut. They were wanting to go to Inverary Castle. That's shut. They were wanting to go to, Glamis Castle or something. All these places are closed. Edinburgh Castle, I don't think you can go inside. I think you can have a wander around the outside, but I think inside is closed. So even once they get here, there isn't really much to do because everything's shut or partially closed at best.
Yeah, which like you say, definitely doesn't help. I suppose our industry has been forced to innovate at speed. I think that's what someone said the other day. We've moved forward 5 years in the last 3 months. How have you and your hotels been innovating?
I'll be honest, I don't think, in terms of service or product, I mean, there's a few that have moved into sort of takeaway. There's a few that have, I'm in Carnoustie actually at the moment. They're in the process of doing it with crossed fingers. They're moving their gym equipment into their function room so they can accommodate the space. We still haven't had the go ahead to reopen sort of properly yet, have we, up here? But their aim is that they will be able to accommodate the space in the vacant function areas that they've got at the moment. We don't have, I suppose, in terms of innovation, I think that's a difficult one. I'd be interested to know what other people are doing, because a lot of the businesses that we operate are fairly traditional and fairly straightforward. But probably half the hotels that I look after are very reliant on tours and groups, which is non-existent. We've picked up the self-drive individual stuff and filled with that. But I suppose, ultimately their requirements are fairly straightforward. We have limited menus, we have limited service times. I don't know whether that comes down under innovation. It kind of seems that would be sort of par for the course or fairly standard stuff.
Oh no, absolutely. I suppose some establishments are looking at technology to help. So with QR codes and menus, or make the guest feel less fearful, give the guest more control, the consumer more control, and also protect the staff at the same time. Is that something that you've also looked at?
We have looked at that in some hotels. I think we've been reluctant to invest in something that potentially is only short term, and maybe we'll regret that in a few months' time and think, well, we should have done it way back. But I think I think I tend to find that people struggle with it. We've tried to implement over the last few years sort of these self-check-in pods. I know we've put some in Brooklyn, but the experience we found, and this wasn't we weren't obviously talking social distancing at that time, but that would be ideal now because people would not need to necessarily approach reception and they would be able to check in remotely almost. But we find that people don't take up on it. I know it's the same experience. I was speaking to someone from Radisson for Park Inn, and they had put in these automated check-in pods at 20 grand a pop or something, and they tend to use them as plant stands because no one really wants to use them. If they come in, they still want to come and talk to a receptionist. They want to check out. We tried certainly to make use of express checkout, so we're popping bills under people's doors and just saying, if it's fine, just leave, we'll charge your card. There's no need to come to the desk, just go whenever. But they still want to. They want to come back. They want to hand their keys to someone. They want to say thank you. They just want that interaction. So a lot of the things that we've talked about and tried, whether it's express check-in or pre-check-in or checkout, it hasn't really made any difference in practice because people will come in and come to the reception desk and talk to the receptionist and want to do the same when they're leaving. And maybe that's our clientele, I'm not sure, but I just don't think people are necessarily ready for that. It's not part of the experience that they want.
That is really interesting because I suppose it's balancing that experience with the fear that a lot of consumers and staff are experiencing. How are you innovating or looking at that fear factor? Because I know a lot of establishments have said that their guests have changed. Some of the older are less reluctant to travel, so they're getting a new kind of traveller. Have you seen any of that?
No, I mean, we're finding on the whole, guests are absolutely fine. I think they appreciate what we're doing, and it gives them a sense of assurances that things are being done, in their interest. There's always a handful, and I'm sure everyone can cite the odd instance where someone's just, not up for it, if you like. I think most people, if they're genuinely worried, then they're probably not out travelling around Scotland. So I think on the whole, people that are coming in don't seem to be overly concerned. They'll sanitize when they come in and they'll follow the rules and they'll use the stairs instead of the lifts if possible, and they're naturally socially distancing. But I don't see any genuine worry. We're certainly not getting, I assumed we might get some people, TripAdvisor or directly saying, oh, I was put at risk because the waiter stood too close, or you had a paper menu, or you had whatever it might be. But we've not had any of that at the moment. And I assume that it's because the people that are out and about just want to be out and about. I don't know whether anyone else has had any kickback from...
I'm sure we'll hear. We'll definitely hear.
Yeah.
And I know sort of, conferencing and banqueting and weddings, that's a huge part of any hotel. How are you reimagining those spaces? Because there have been some very interesting things that have come up with everything from drive-through weddings, to having events virtually with a mixture of the actual. So are you seeing any changes there, any positives for the future? Or are you reimagining the spaces?
We're not really seeing. I mean, I've mentioned before about the gym at Carnoustie, but we're not really seeing any demand at all at the moment. People are just rolling their weddings into the following year. We don't have a huge amount of wedding driven properties, but they're just putting them back. And in terms of the spaces, unfortunately, they're sitting empty, or they're being used maybe for staff areas. I know the meeting room here next door to me is set up where the staff are coming in and signing in and taking their temperatures and all that sort of stuff. There's a meeting room aside for that, and they've got another meeting room which they're using as the sort of staff canteen area, but there's not you know, as I say, and a couple that they're using for gym equipment, but there's not any, I think beyond that, we haven't really found a use yet for those spaces. It would be great, you know, if they're worried about, you know, schools social distancing, then it'd be great to have a school come and use a meeting room as a classroom, or, you know, but they seem reluctant to do that at the moment, don't they?
Well, I suppose, like you say, everyone is just trying to figure it out one day at a time as we go. Some establishments are struggling to open because back of house is really, really tight, and they're looking at potentially embracing the delivered-in model in hotels. Again, something that you've thought of, or are you sort of in that lucky spot where you don't need to?
Yes, no, we are definitely moving towards these more delivered-in items, and in terms of reduced menus, because it reduces the labour, obviously, in the kitchen. So we are making, and also where there's some properties where we aren't offering a dinner, we've opened as on a B&B basis. So in order to enhance the bar snack offering, if you like, so it's more than crisps and nuts. You know, we've been sourcing sort of anti-pasty platters and, you know, stuff that could just be, you know, add a better quality. It's not a dining offer, but it's a better quality. I don't like to say bar snack, but you know, you can get a decent pre-made, brought in croque monsieur that you know, goes in the oven for a few minutes, and a duty manager can knock it out, or stick a few, you know, nuts and olives and cheeses and meats onto a wooden board and stick that out. You know, so yeah, we're definitely looking at that, where especially where we're not offering a restaurant service in the evening, but just generally as well, because, you know, normally we would be serving, you know, a good 50, 60, 100, 120 covers, albeit they might be tours, you know, coaches, and, you know, so the service is a lot more straightforward because it's a very limited menu. And the individual guests, the individual travellers that are out and about, obviously want a little bit more choice. So the bought-in items, the lamb shanks and all that sort of stuff are certainly the way to go, I think.
And I'm sure it's far nicer than just plonking it on a board. With these sort of staycation and community, and we've been in this, obviously, and we remain in this really strange place where we've had to look at our communities. We've been stuck at home. We now are staycationing, so embracing local communities, local produce, local businesses. Someone the other day said that a lot of brands are having to embrace localism as part of their new brand identity, and that it's a really good idea to do so because travelers are looking for that and looking to support that. Are you seeing that come through with your hotels?
Yeah, definitely. I was talking to a manager yesterday, actually, and they said that the vast majority of their guests are just coming out of Glasgow and Edinburgh. There's even very few coming from further south, you know, coming up from England. You hear it in the lobbies and stuff. You hear the Scottish accents rather than, you know, certainly any English accents. There's a bit of Northern European, especially around that North Coast 500. I think there's still a few Dutch and Germans, you know, travelling on the motorbikes and camper vans around. But it's very much a Scottish market at the moment. And that may change over I think the English schools broke up, didn't they, last week? So we may see a bit more of that over the coming weeks. But at the moment, it's probably, I would say, 80-90% people from Edinburgh and Glasgow, or Scottish, travelling further north. There
was a good question from Alex about regulations. Do you know of the regulations around tour groups or road trips? Are there any specifics?
Road trips, well, you mean as in individual road trips? I don't think there are any. There's the limitations on, obviously, tables of more than 8 people or 6, whatever it is. And I suppose if you've got a dozen people on motorbikes doing the North Coast 500, that causes a bit of a challenge at dinner time when they start pulling tables together. But we can only just manage that as and when it comes up. I think in terms of coaches, we do have a few that are suggesting they're running. They're not international stuff. It's Glentons and Newmarket and stuff that's coming up from down south. And they tend to be running half full. So they're telling us. So the few coaches we'll probably have 20, 22 people on. But they still say they're running them. So I don't know how they manage to do that on their margins, but they seem to, we've still got a few that are saying they're running. They may release, but we'll see.
Yeah, yeah. And all the work and the policies in Scotland that you've implemented and all the sort of lessons that you've learned, are those helping or sort of hindering your process and your thinking when it comes to opening other hotels in the rest of England, and vice versa?
I wouldn't say it's hindering. I mean, there's restrictions on numbers. I mean, but I wouldn't say it's really hindering. I mean, the English hotels opened first, so we did have some, group chats on what they'd learned and what the general feedback was. And I think it's been pretty similar from what I've heard. What they were telling us the week or two before we opened here was that generally people were appreciative of what we were doing, but not overly concerned. That breakfast was a nightmare because everyone wants to come down at the same time. The buffet, it's hard work because you can't have buffets, and you're plating bowls of cereal and stuff rather than people helping themselves. So it's not. I mean, it's certainly more labour intensive than perhaps we expected. But I think the experience they've had down south is similar to what we're seeing up here. Yeah.
No, fair enough. And I suppose the other important part is talent. We've as an industry seen a lot of unfortunate redundancies and job cuts, but we have a need and a responsibility to keep good talent and to give hope to talent. How are you engaging with staff and trying to give that hope, especially to sort of young people in our industry that love our industry and want to stay or continue to make it their future?
I mean, we're trying to develop people, continue to try and develop people through job sharing. And now when especially we're short of people, busier than expected, we can cross-train people in different departments, which is ideal. So trying to develop people that way. I think the worry is that where the hotels remain, or my worry is where hotels may remain closed, that those people who have those skills will move on to other industries. And I think a lot of, I don't think other industries necessarily realise the transferable skills that a lot of our people have, whether it's customer service or IT or technical ability, and they will be forced to go out and look for other roles, and may then not return. And that's the worry, and we just need to try and hang on to them. But it's very difficult when we don't know where we'll be next month or in 2 months' time. The worry at the moment, as busy as we are, is that we don't know how long this will last. Whether it's just the summer demand and then it'll fall off, or whether we'll have to close again. And if we have to close again, then I don't know what happens. Then looking, it's not going to be viable to open until next March. Even if we just have a local lockdown for a month, for 4 weeks or 5 weeks, that's the summer over, and we're probably not then going to open again till February or March time. Those people will move on, and they will. And I don't know what we can do to keep them engaged, because if the business isn't open, we can't keep them around, unfortunately.
No, very, very valid point. I think someone said the other day how important it is to appreciate leaders have to make difficult decisions, but how important it is to make those decisions and those redundancies with kindness, so that you're still keeping people there, because we will we will come back, things will get better. And to be able to still have that talent close by, that yes, if they maybe have temporarily gone to another industry, if we've treated them well and with kindness, they will want to come back. So how important that is for leaders to focus on.
Yeah, I sent a note this morning to my colleagues down south saying, look, if you're remaining closed, then certainly for the next, appreciate they'll be having very difficult conversations with people that they perhaps can't retain, or people will be knocking on their door saying, when am I back, when am I back? And I got a note this morning saying, look, we can give people a couple of months' work, hopefully up here, if that makes those conversations easier. Wherever they are, they're having to say to people, listen, I haven't got anything for you, but you can go pick up some work in Scotland for the next couple of months. So just and that would develop their experiences as well, just moving around. But obviously, not everyone's in a position to be able to do that.
No, fair enough. And this has all put a lot of pressure on leaders. There's always pressure on leaders, but this has put a lot more pressure on leaders. How has it changed you as a leader? How have you looked at things or had to look at things?
I think you have to maintain that positive hope without trying to gloss over what's clearly going to be a serious situation. And I think it will continue to become serious. I think being honest with people and upfront as early as you can be. We've certainly had conversation with my managers to say that, okay, we're back, we're open, you're off furlough, you're on full pay, but we don't know where we'll be in November, December, January, February, and there may well be a period of short-term working again. So be prepared for that. And I think they appreciate that honesty. Before you go and book that holiday, or before you go and sign that lease on that new car, be aware that you may be a period of 3 or 4 months where you're not on a full salary. And I think just that, that honesty, and just be open with people, as well as giving them hope and the sort of, we're all in this together. I think the team of GMs that I have in Scotland are all pretty close. They've been with us some time. They have a WhatsApp group. They have lockdown quizzes on a Thursday evening. It's been, they've kind of kept themselves going, and I think they appreciate the fact that I'm not on every Thursday night for the lockdown quiz, or wasn't.
Missed opportunity.
But they appreciate that you're there, every other week or once a month, just to dip in and say how are you. So, like I say, I think it's being positive and listening to their concerns, and I suppose understanding. I've said before, we don't know what their financial pressures are. We don't know what they're worrying about. A lot of them are great as hoteliers at putting a brave face on things and going out and smiling when at customers who you perhaps don't want to smile at. And I think we do the same with each other as well. We put on a brave face, don't we? And we don't know what pressures they've got. So I think in making sure that they're aware individually that, how are you fixed? How, you okay at the moment? We've still got 2 or 3 hotels that are shut, and those managers remain on furlough. And they probably won't open. We won't open those hotels this year. And I've had those conversations with those managers saying, look, you'll be on furlough. That's till October. I'm not sure what we'll do after that. But you need to let us know if it's going to cause big difficulties.
No, fair. And you raise a valid point. People are in this time needing to be part of something bigger than themselves, needing to have that connection with other people, to share knowledge, or just to have a sounding block. We're definitely finding that, build those friendships, even if they are just virtually. It's really important. My inbox is exploding with questions, so I'm going to pull some of those in. Anne, you putting your hand up very high. Can I pull you in to ask a few of your questions, please?
Yeah, I'm very forceful sometimes.
Oh no.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions, and I apologize if my English is not very joined up. It's always screwed up when I get back. Got two kind of questions. The first one is to ask if you've had, as a group, that if you've had an engagement with local communities and joined up some of the responses to COVID with other local, maybe third sector organizations. That's kind of my first question. But separate to that, the government have released quite a lot of reports lately about progress against the WHO's development goals. There is a zero economic, I had to Google that, what zero economic was, but it's all about carbon footprints. And of course, in all of this is a lot about economic recovery. And I was thinking back a few months to some of these conversations, and there was a guy from the East Coast who were talking about the problems they were facing with Brexit and keeping staff if the Europeans are not going to be here anymore. And young people have been identified as a particularly key vulnerable group in terms of the future and unemployment. So thinking about a little bit medium terms here, are there any joined up thinking about how to keep the young people, give them hope and keep them engaged in the industry so they're not lost to somewhere else with their transferable skills, and preparing for the Brexit when the business will pick up in the moment? Because right now there seems to have been quite a lot of opportunities to join up with other organizations that might help mitigate some of your problems in terms of staff and knowledge and skills later on. Did that make sense? No?
Richard?
Sorry, I no.
What Anne is saying,
Sorry, yeah.
local communities or what sort of organizations, considering the fact that Brexit, we're not going to be able to, pandemic aside, have the benefit of a European staff and European talent. Are there any organizations that you can collaborate with to engage with staff, UK staff, or to keep them filled with hope and for the future when we do come back, but we can't come back full of European staff? Anne, was that a good?
Yeah,
summary?
I think
that's pretty good interpretation, actually,
Yes,
of what I meant. Yeah.
My Scottish accent, I'm all over it.
No, I was trying to think. We've been struggling with staffing for years. I mean, every year we say it's tough. I remember 25 years ago, we saying when we were struggling for staff, and I think at the time, the fact that we were opening up to Poland and Romania was the answer to our problems, and it turned out to be the case. But that we were struggling for staff way back then. I remember on working groups and what we're going to do, what are we going to do. So I don't think that struggle goes on, and over the time, we're trying to engage with the local colleges and schools and universities. Yeah, that continues. I wouldn't say that's something new that we're doing because of Brexit or because of climate, or I think that's something that we've always tried to do, because the staffing situation, certainly over the last 4 or 5 years, feels like it gets worse every year. But as I said, that's the case. So I do worry that we can't. When you say, is there anything we can do now? I do wonder. I do worry. I do sort of wonder what else we can do, because I'm kind of thinking we've tried, or we continue to plug everything we can. With back to work initiatives and liaising with the Job Centre Plus and the schools, colleges, and so we have been doing that for some time. I suppose maybe we need to step that up, or reinvigorate it, or attack it in a different way. I sat in a group, and the talk was about role models, and it's difficult to staff in catering because we can't get any role models that people can look up to. But I did think, we've had chefs as role models for years now. There's hundreds of celebrity chefs, and we still struggle to find chefs. So I don't know whether the lack of role models is the reason, because I would have thought that we wouldn't have such a problem with, finding chefs if if all these kids are looking at the celebrity chefs and saying that's what I want to do. So I don't know is the honest answer where we go next. Other than continue to plug the associations or relationships that we've got within the community. And as I say, it's normally the schools, it's the colleges, it's the sort of various back to work programs, it's the recruiting people of maybe of an older generation for specific roles. As far as I'm aware, those things are already happening. So in terms of new ideas, we're kind of open to suggestions from anyone else.
Fair enough. And like you say, maybe just pushing that slightly harder, considering the future. Gary, can I bring you in? You've got a great question to ask, being in Scotland yourself.
Good morning, all. Hi, Richard. Just a question. As Bespoke, quite an influential player in the sector, especially in Scotland, is there anything, or are you involved in the Scottish Tourism Recovery Group? And what are the key messages you'd like to feed into government about the recovery period and beyond?
I'm not involved specifically in the Scottish Recovery Group, to be honest. I know we have a seat on the Institute of Hospitality, especially with Robin and Gordon here at Carnoustie, who's the chairman. And I believe they feed in. They feed in. I think the message is that and it's probably the same with any industry, is kind of let us look after ourselves. We can manage the social distancing. We can manage our businesses safely, and we don't need the restrictions. It's not a one size fits all. If you've got a small pokey bar, then and you can't manage social distancing, or pub, then a small inn, tavern or whatever, and you can't manage the distancing, and you can't manage the crowd, or you can't manage the flow of people, then maybe you can't open. But this idea of hospitality needs to close. It's such a huge umbrella it's not right for everyone. There's some of our properties further north certainly have huge lounge spaces because they deal with small groups. The public space in somewhere like Dornoch or Gairloch is huge, because they have, if you like, an entertainment room. I mean, it's a lounge, but it's where they stick the turn on in the evening, which isn't happening. They have plenty of space. We can manage it. So the idea of the hospitality needs to close down. I think that's the message that we need to feed back, is allow us to do the risk assessment, allow us to manage the risk, and don't just treat us all the same, because there's many, I think in the main, hotels, they're not pubs, and they're not, restaurants where we've crammed in as many tables as we possibly can, and people are sitting, side by side and cheek by jowl. So I think that, let us manage it. We used to risk management. We understand cross-contamination because we work with foods. We understand risk assessments. We understand, we have a basic understanding of that kind of thing. We have norovirus risk assessments, and we've all probably dealt with similar situations. So I think we're probably better placed than most to deal with these things.
That's fair. Not a one size fits all type solution. Understood. Alex, I'm going to bring you in. You got an interesting question about the word not many people like, VAT.
Yeah, Richard, when we spoke last week, you were talking about we talked about the VAT cut a little bit, and just, its intention was to help the sector, but also stimulate growth in terms of visitor numbers. How's Bespoke handling that? Is it? I would hope that it's the hotels that are using it to their advantage, and that the guests are seeing. I think you mentioned something about guests already benefiting from a better rate anyway. What's the story behind that?
Yeah, I think that's our line. I mean, I believe that the intention of the Chancellor was basically do with it what you want. I don't think there was either it's to help them or it's so that, I suppose it is so that we can offer keen, to help us offer keen prices and maintain a margin. But yeah, we you know, most of our rates, to be fair now, you know, given the demand that we've seen in most places, we're probably back up to full rate. A lot of the business that was booked prior to the last week or two was at vastly reduced rates. I've mentioned before in Edinburgh, you know, I mean, you would normally get, you know, you wouldn't get a room for less than £350, and you could probably get a room for £120. So if someone's booking on 120 and saying, can I have my 15% off? Well, they've already had way more than 15% off. So I think, again, it's giving the information to this team, the managers, and making sure that gets passed on, that they're confident to tackle those questions and say, well, normally you would be paying £160, you're actually paying £120. So you've already had your, you know, we have passed that on. I know, you know, people say, well, we'll keep it, but in my mind, we've already passed on that saving in the vast majority of cases. And then I think on from that, you know, we're still paying minimum wage increases. We're still seeing the increase in in food prices. And we've got, you know, 3 months of no business behind us, and possibly, you know, more months ahead with zero business. So I think when you explain that to people, funnily enough, I had someone just a couple of days ago actually stayed there was 2 nights in a hotel. They'd already stayed one night, and in the morning asked if they could have 15% off. So they were already in the hotel. But they'd also booked through booking.com, and I explained that they'd actually paid booking.com 45 quid, and now we're asking us for another 35 pounds, you know, off the bill. And I think when it's explained politely, not, you know, then they kind of go, oh right, yeah, I see what you mean. I think when people book direct, I think that's another of our standard line. Look, if you book direct with us, then I don't mind having a conversation about a discount. But if you're going to book through a third party, you know, you've used your discount there.
Yeah. I have another question just about encouraging growth back into the cities. There's, with the lack of distraction, say for example, with the Edinburgh Festival not happening this year, there's a lot of people just migrating out to your rural properties. Is there a task force? Is there something within Bespoke or the wider industry that is going to help to drag people back into the cities? Because that's really where the weakness is at the moment, into the city properties businesses.
I'll be honest, I don't know. Obviously the city marketing, I can't remember the name in Edinburgh.
ETAG, is there? Or there's several of them, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose we tend to assume that they're doing that. I think it's difficult, as I say, when a lot of the attractions aren't open, and it's the corporate, and I guess a lot of it's out of their hands because it's the international stuff that's not there. I think the city hotels could be a bit keener. A lot of them, I'm sure £150 in Edinburgh to them is, you know, is already cheaper than anything they've ever known. But, you know, set up against, you know, a rate or package that you might get out rurally, it's still pretty steep. It's still you know, it's still expensive in the wider, you know, context.
Especially when nothing's open.
Yeah, especially when there's nothing open. Yeah, so I don't know. I'd be honest, we're not involved in anything specific to drive volume into the city. We only have the Bonham, so and we don't have anything in Glasgow, and I'm not aware of anything further south, whether it's Manchester or London or Bristol or any of the other cities, I'm afraid.
Ramesh, you had a few questions. Can I pull you in here?
No, firstly, Richard, I sense and feel your pain. I'm in central London. I've got lots of friends who, like me, want to go somewhere, but we're all sort of concerned that whether we book through, say, Secret Escapes or Voyage Privé or book directly with you, what is the refund system? Because, say, 3 weeks from now, if the government decides that they're going to close various other sectors in order to open the schools, then we might be left sort of wondering how do we get a refund or what do we do, and that sort of thinking means you say, look, I'd rather not book anywhere, just stay at home and not have the pain.
I believe, and someone will probably correct me if I can't speak for, I mean, we do use Voyage Privé and with Secret Escapes and Great Little Breaks and all the usual providers. I believe that it's all fully refundable and transferable. I know certainly anything that books with us is fully refundable and transferable. I know obviously we try and persuade people to roll it over to a future date, and we did that with everything that we had to release through March, April, May and June. We rolled it over, and at the time my instruction was, look, just take it whenever. It doesn't matter whether it's August, it's September, just book it in, because I don't think we're going to be beating people off with a stick. Kind of regretting that a little bit now, because we've got some stuff in that's probably we wouldn't have necessarily honoured, and we'd probably have rather refunded it than roll it over. But I'd rather sit at the end of the year or the end of the summer saying, well, we ran high occupancy, missed an opportunity on the rate of £5 or £10, been sitting there with nothing. But as far as I'm aware, everything, certainly with us, and certainly with Ipson and Groupon and Travelzoo and all that, is all fully refundable. We've had to drop all the conditions. Voyage Privé, for example, I'm not sure. I don't know what their specific terms and conditions are, but I would like to think that it's all it's all fully, transferable and refundable.
Okay, Richard, the other concern is that, yes, you've got great properties, it's lovely to come there, just for fresh air and just sort of even with a couple of books and sort of better than just sitting in a flat. But how do you get there? And what stops are you going to have to make? And do you take a flight, or do you have to then drive all the way and you're going to have to make stops? I mean, those are the sort of things that are making you, should I really go that far? And what happens if there's the local lockdown there?
Well, I know. I mean, I would like to, I kind of assume that the government will hold on. My concern as well is that we are holding on to keep a lid on any rising cases to allow August, September to run through, because that's boom time. I think my worry is that come October, November, the closing of hospitality becomes less of a risk, because revenues decline anyway, and all of a sudden it's not as important to you shutting hotels, bars, restaurants in November as it would be if you shut them in August. And my personal concern is that that's potentially what the government might be doing, is getting the summer revenue, allowing these businesses a bit of a lifeline. But any further lockdown may come towards the back end of the year when it's not as important to the economy, and obviously schools or construction or other industries become more important. But I think it'll be all right till September.
Can I just pick up? Sorry, Lauren. Can I pick up on something else? I mean, Richard, you talked about the government's effectively saying to you, "Come on, you know what you're doing. You take the risk assessment." The trouble with that is that if you look at the country as a whole, and I know that people say, "Oh, my liberties, etc." But I look at this more like saying this is a national emergency. We haven't had one for a very long time, and unless we all behave, and take responsibility, this is going to continue for a very long time. So the government is caught between saying that, because we think we're going to offend people, and saying, okay, on the other hand, just go and do what everybody wants. I mean, there's a survey in the Times today. They went around to various young people in Manchester over the weekend, and a couple of 22-year-olds who think that coronavirus is a dispute between the US and China, and they can't understand why people are dying. So, I mean, if that is the level of knowledge that you have amongst people who are actually studying at sixth form colleges and universities, then it's a frightening prospect. If they don't understand that this is something frightening.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think they're the minority that might think that. I think there's a lot of young people that say, well, it only affects over 80. If I get a bit of a cold, you know, that's it. But I do think, and I don't particularly want a police state, but I do think we've been very lax on, on implementing it. I think, certainly in Australia, they've increased fines for if you're caught without a mask and all this sort of stuff. We don't have any of that. I mean, we don't even, when we reopened, I think some of the hotels had a visit. The local policeman might pop in or someone, but no one's policing them. I went to a pub the other week, and no one took a name or number or anything like that. I mean, but they're busy, they're operating. There's clearly no checks that some of these businesses aren't really following. They've got the sanitizer out, they've got the signs up, they've got the screens at the bar. It felt more like it was a token gesture. And tick the box. But I think, unfortunately, as much as I don't, no one likes it, I think they need to start policing it better. And if someone's not adhering, then shut them down. I think that would make people sit up and listen, and shut them down for a minimum of, say, 4 weeks. And I think that would make people sit up and take notice, because the ones that are then investing in the training and the measures that need to be taken, we're all going to end up suffering.
Oh, very fair. I'm just aware we're running out of time. I wonder if there's just a last positive. I know everyone's worrying about the rest of the year and worrying about a second wave, but a positive leave behind that you can give everyone for the immediate future.
I think we just need to make our voices heard as an industry. I think we need to look after each other and our teams, which kind of goes without saying. And I think we just need to hang on and get through the winter. I'm fairly confident for next year, and the fact that you see, people, I think, are, when you see them on the beaches down in Bournemouth, or you see them jumping around in Liverpool when they've won the title, or people are obviously keen to get back to what they used to, and clearly not overly concerned. So I think we need to try and hang on to that and know that people will want to get, we talk about a new normal, but I think people really want to get back to what they know. Obviously, the longer this goes on, the more distant, they'll forget what went before. But I think people will come. I think the bounce back will be quicker than 3 years or whatever people are talking about, because I think it's inside people that they just want to get back to normal. They want to go out for dinner. They want to meet with family and friends. People want to go on holiday, and are not, as soon as they're allowed to, I think they will do.
Absolutely. We're all social creatures, and just, dying to carry on with the old normal. Richard, you're wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Really appreciate your time. Sorry we've run out of it, but wishing you a really good week, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Bye.
Thank you, Lauren. Well done.
Thank you.
Good.